Hi, this is FUAD ABASOV, a broker with Right at Home Realty, and this is your monthly real estate statistics. Residential real estate market sales activity hit a seasonal slowdown. Home sales continued to move lower in November as demand has faded away toward the end of the year. It is not unusual for market activity to soften as we head into December holidays, though statistics indicate that it's notably slower than the same period a year earlier. Not surprisingly, it seems as buyers and sellers are still feeling frustrated and constrained by high mortgage rates. The number of listings across Toronto rose, noticeably with less demand. The impact of the pandemic, which caused a shortage of inventory, is now being addressed, and the market is replenishing its stock. The current inventory level is described as healthy, but there is still a noticeable disparity between homes selling in competitive multiple offer situations and those that are not. The cost of borrowing, influenced by high mortgage rates, is creating a challenge for buyers. Their purchasing power may not align with their expectations, making the decision-making process difficult. Buyers seem to be adopting a wait-and-see approach, potentially postponing decisions until the spring when new supply traditionally floods the market. Additionally, the Bank of Canada's rate approach will likely play a crucial role in shaping buyer behavior. Note to those who are in active search of a home. Despite elevated interest rates, there are some very good opportunities to be found. If you take a longer-term view and perhaps pay the higher interest for a year or so and then renegotiate the rate, there are some really good deals out there. Despite a slight decrease in the average cost of a single-family detached homes compared to October, prices have remained relatively stable year over year. The anticipation of a drop in interest rates in the second or third quarter of the coming year could potentially stimulate housing market activity. If this happens, it is predicted to act as a catalyst for increased buyer participation, leading to a busier market. Now, let's take a closer look at detached home sales in Toronto and surrounding areas. In Toronto, an average selling price of a detached home in November was slightly lower than in October, but 4.7% higher year over year. The amount of sold properties went down by 6%. The amount of new listings went up by almost 16%. On average, it takes 21 days for a detached home to be sold in Toronto today. In Vaughan, an average selling price of a detached home in November was $1.64 million. The price didn't change compared to November of last year. The amount of sold properties went down by 6.2%. The amount of new listings went up by 19%. It takes on average 24 days for a detached home to be sold in Vaughan today. Average selling price in Richmond Hill compared to last year in November has not changed and is sitting at $1.81 million. The amount of sold properties went up by 6%. The amount of new listings went up by 33%. On average, it takes 22 days for a detached home to be sold in Richmond Hill. In Mississauga, an average selling price of a detached home in November was $1.4 million, 3.8% decrease compared to November of last year. The amount of sold properties went down by 25%. The amount of new listings went up by 14%. It takes on average 20 days for a detached home to be sold in Mississauga today. An average selling price of a detached home in Markham went up compared to last year by 1.8% and is sitting at $1.78 million today. The amount of sold properties compared to last November went up by 7%. The amount of new listings actually went down by almost 10%. On average, it takes 20 days for a detached home to be sold in Markham today. The average sale price of a detached home in Newmarket in November was $1.24 million, a 4% decrease from November of 2022. The amount of sold properties went down by almost 31%. The amount of new listings went up by 25%. It takes on average 21 days for a detached home to be sold in Newmarket today. An average selling price of a detached home in Aurora in November was $1.66 million, 8% increase compared to November of last year. The amount of sold properties also went up by 28%. The amount of new listings went up by almost 11%. On average, it takes 39 days for a detached home to be sold in Aurora today. Innisfil saw a decline in prices compared to October, and the average selling price today is $867,000, 1% decrease compared to November of last year. The amount of sold properties went down by 50%. The amount of new listings also went down by 18%. On average, it takes 32 days for a detached home to be sold in Innisfil today. Average selling price of detached home in King City in November was $2.95 million, 11% decrease compared to November of last year. The amount of sold properties hasn't changed. The amount of new listings, however, went up by 87%. On average, it takes 48 days for a detached home to be sold in King City today. Average selling price of detached home in Bradford in November was $1.12 million, 6.8% increase compared to November of last year. The amount of sold properties went down by 9%. The amount of new listings, however, went up by 75%. On average, it takes 18 days for a detached home to be sold in Bradford. In Milton, the average selling price of detached home did not change compared to October. However, compared to November of last year, it's down by 14% and is sitting at $1.28 million. The amount of sold properties went up by 18%. The amount of new listings went up by 24%. On average, it takes 24 days for a detached home to be sold in Milton today. An average selling price of detached home in Stoufville in November was $1.4 million, 20% decrease compared to November of last year. The amount of sold properties went down by 25%. The amount of new listings went up by 24%. On average, it takes almost 3 weeks for a detached home to be sold in Stoufville today. An average selling price of detached home in Barrie in November was $789,000, 1% increase compared to November of last year. The amount of sold properties went down by 58%. The amount of new listings went down by 3%. On average, it takes 24 days for a detached home to be sold in Barrie today. In summary, the current state of the residential real estate market indicates a complex interplay of factors, including seasonal trends, inventory replenishment, high mortgage rates affecting affordability, and the potential impact of future interest rate changes by the Bank of Canada. If you'd like to receive your own personalized sales report about home sales in your neighborhood, please call me at 647-801-3401 or email me at sold@fuadhomes.com. Thanks for watching and see you next month.